Hello, and welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast. And now, here's your host, Joe Dolce.
Hey, welcome to another Brave New Weed podcast, high-minded conversations for the post-prohibition era. I'm Joe Dolce, and I'm with Matthew Hendershot. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Joe. How you doing today?
I'm good, and I wanted to tell folks about our upcoming live podcast that's going to occur at the Alchemist Kitchen on August 15th. What can you
yeah, we're very excited. Very excited.
This is a podcast about the healing power of CBD. We got a lot of feedback, a lot of positive feedback on our last podcast, which was all about CBD, and we want to continue the conversation. So I asked one of my favorite doctors, Dr. Janella Chin, who's a woman I would go to for any illness, but who also happens to be an internist as well as a medical cannabis trained physician, to join us in this conversation. So we can really find out what's the myth, what's the fact, how to use this plant substance to our benefits for certain conditions.
Well, I think it's going to be really good for a lot of people who are not necessarily familiar with CBD in addition to THC. A lot of people who have only used cannabis from a recreational standpoint, or people who have not used cannabis at all, who are now very interested. There's been a lot of conversation about this. So I think getting in there, sharing actual facts with people, and CBD is legal in all 50 states. So getting in there and sharing information as best we can. I think it's going to be a great event and very informational for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't start as a medical patient. I started as a user of cannabis. But as I got a little older, I found that certain conditions like sleeping or certain pain conditions, if you exercise and have aches and pains or inflammation, can really be helped by CBD. I've been using it myself for over a year now. It's not psychoactive, which means that a lot of us can go to work and do the things we do that we couldn't normally do if we were a little high. And it doesn't have a whole lot of side effects. As a matter of fact, it has almost no side effects. As a matter of fact, it's probably the safest medicine ever created by nature on planet Earth. The safety profile is extraordinary, and the healing benefits it's 20 times more anti-inflammatory than these NSAID drugs like Aleve or ibuprofen. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I've been using the Charlotte's Web CBD tincture now for a couple of weeks. I'm a fan. It helps with muscle soreness. It helps with pains and migraines that I get related to stress.
Stress? Are you a stressed out person?
Oh, me? No, me, stress, never. Come on.
It's almost amazing. It's like amazing. It's this ancient plant that treats all of these modern illnesses, including stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been actually having a lot of conversations with my mother. My mother is diagnosed with fibromyalgia. She has a lot of pain related to that, and is on a cocktail of opioid pain medicines that I would love to see her get away from. And so we're talking and discussing CBD as a potential option to help her manage her pain.
Well, it's also interesting that you can use it in conjunction with opioids, and it powers the effect, so you can use fewer opioids as a result. So tell your mom that, and I wish her luck in getting it and seeing if she has any success with it. The event is on the 15th of August. You can tune in live on Facebook. We'll see a live Facebook recording, and you can listen to the podcast live as well.
Yeah, and anybody who would want additional information or would want to come, we're doing it at the Alchemist's Kitchen here in Manhattan. And you can find all of the ways to RSVP for the event and read all the information about the event at thehealingpowerofcbd.splashthat.com.
Shall I repeat that for the audience?
Yeah, go for it.
It's thehealingpowerofcbd.splashthat.com.
We're also going to put that up, make sure that it's out on all of our social media. So if you go to our Facebook or our Twitter or follow us on Instagram, you're definitely going to see this link float around. We get a lot of stuff out there, and we'll make sure that people can access it. And as a special bonus, we have a Patreon reward level that says if you donate, if you support the show at a certain level, that you can come to a recording of the show. So we're going to bundle these things together, and everyone at that Patreon reward level or higher, your ticket to this event is on us.
Fantastic. That's good. Isn't that nice of us? Very generous. Very generous of us.
Well, I think it's very nice of all of those patrons to be supporting the show.
I agree with you, really. Want to do some news?
Absolutely. Let's get into it.
Let's talk about Cory Booker.
Man, this is something else, right?
Okay, come on. This guy is like trying a Herculean feat. He's trying to pass a national cannabis legalization act through this crazy Republican Congress.
Yeah, and not only that, but the bill as it's written now that he's proposed actually incentivizes states to legalize cannabis and study it, and that the federal government will give you money to help study and grow these programs in your state.
You know, it sounds wrong in terms of American politics, but it makes so much sense. It also has a part of the bill that gives restitution and pays retribution for people and communities that have been targeted by the drug war.
Yeah, absolutely. It expunges any marijuana offenses that are nonviolent, obviously, but any prisoners will be released. Anyone with possession that gets expunged off your record, and those aggrieved get some restitution. It's impossible, right, Joe? That this makes it out of the House or out of the Senate.
This is out of this Congress. This is highly improbable, I would say. But we have to give Cory Booker 3 million thumbs up for trying this, even for what he said. He said, "I believe the federal government should get out of the illegal marijuana business." And I think that is a really smart way of looking at it. The government is creating illegal business.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, the prohibition is what creates the black market. It's what keeps it going. So, you just get out of that deal, and all of a sudden, you have the tool to sell and tax cannabis legally, and you just start chipping away at the underground market.
The most amazing thing is over 60% of Americans support legalization. So we know this guy's got the people behind him.
Well, so that brings up an interesting point of this appears on the part of Mr. Booker to be a very populist maneuver. And I think it's great that it drags this whole conversation out into the public eye. Like, now the Senate has to debate this situation, and they have to relook at the scheduling of cannabis, and they have to actually talk and engage with this stuff. And to me, it seems like an attention-getting war cry for what might be a presidential run here in a few years.
Well, I like the idea of it. I think let's watch how the media covers this, if they do at all. And just to tell the listeners here, we've asked Cory to come on the show and talk to us about it. Hopefully he'll say yes and tell us why he took this turn.
Well, and honestly, with this bill on the Senate floor right now is the time to call your Congress critters and be like, guys, get to work.
Your Congress critters. Yep, call them up. Something else happened that I want to bring up, and I want to pat ourselves on the back for this one, Matt, because there's a lawsuit that was filed against our friend Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions and the DEA that calls marijuana's Schedule 1 status unconstitutional. Now, why I want to pat ourselves on the back is because two of the plaintiffs in this case have recently been on our show. One was Marvin Washington, the football player, who's very outspoken about legal cannabis.
Also been in the news for some other going-ons with the NFL, and is in negotiations. The NFL, they're winning that fight with the NFL to allow studies to take place for cannabis on that front too. So 2 big moves for him.
That's right, Marvin. He's amazing, Marvin. And the other pat on the back, self-serving promotion, I'm going to say, is the Cannabis Cultural Association, which is a group of young folks based in New York, trying to make the cannabis industry more diverse, is also a plaintiff in this suit.
Yeah, it's great to see Jacob and the CCA out there making moves. That's when they were on the show. It was very early on in our podcast life. And they told us to keep an eye out because they were going to make some moves, and now here they are.
So what
front page news.
And what they're saying is that the Controlled Substance Act, which keeps marijuana shackled in Schedule 1, was enacted and enforced in a discriminatory manner, historically targeting populations of color, and today prevents them from participating in the legal cannabis industry.
Right.
Let's wish them a lot of good fortune in bringing.
Well, and it definitely leans toward a fight that they can win, because the only defense against this lawsuit is to lean on the CSA. And part of that Schedule 1 classification requires that there is no medical benefit. And we now know from a couple of major think tanks in the United States who have done studies and some 20,000 published documentations that there is actually a ton of medical benefit to this plant. And therefore, if those two things are paired together in a court of law, this whole thing should fall apart.
Let's also remind each other that the United States government owns a patent on cannabis as a neuroprotectant. It got this patent, I believe, in 2003. The number is findable online. So the U.S. government owns a patent that cannabis can protect the brain in cases of injury.
That sounds like a medical use to me, doesn't it?
I would say that sounds pretty medical to me. So this is all getting sort of interesting and coming into the light, and I think the more we can shine the light on it, the more informed we can be.
Yeah, definitely check this article out. Learn what you can about this lawsuit. Do what you can. I think that there are donation centers set up to where you can contribute to the legal funds. And right now, if you go to thecannabis.co online, there's a great article explaining all of this, all of the nuance of this lawsuit.
Thank you, Matt. Let's have the show. Let's talk about our guest this week. Are you ready for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, first of all, do you vape?
I do vape in a couple of different forms, I guess I should say.
Let's get intimate here. Tell me how you vaporize.
So I have a dry herb vaporizer. That's a Convection vaporizer that I use in my personal use. I like that over, a lot of times when I do vape, it's just me by myself, and it's a much easier, kind of softer delivery. It doesn't get me too high. I don't go too far. You pack a bowl, you smoke the whole bowl. Sometimes that's too much. The vape really lets me have better control over that. Mm-hmm. And then I also have just a small, battery container cartridge vape that I actually find very discreet for when I'm out in public. And
for using for oils, you mean, right?
Yeah, for oils, yes.
And what kind of dry herb vaporizer do you use?
So I have a G-Pen dry herb vape.
Do you like it?
I do. It recently broke, and that bums me out. It's got a plastic mouthpiece, and the plastic seems to have broken. So I'm kind of bummed out about that. It still functions, but it looks a little bad, and sometimes that matters. But yeah.
So I've experimented with a lot of vaporizers in the last couple of years, and I mean, the one thing I can definitively say is they're not all created equal. That's for sure. I mean, First of all, there's this convection versus conduction. It took me years to remember the difference there, but conduction is when it has like a hot plate in it. It's almost like you're frying the herb. So you can actually burn plant matter, which is not the point of vaporizing. Convection is like a convection oven. It circulates hot air around the herb, so it melts the oil.
Right.
Get a better flow. It tastes better. It's just a more clean way of vaporizing. They're also more expensive, those vaporizers. They tend to be over $250 each. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good investment because I'm not really into inhaling plant matter these days. So I like it. I also think a lot of vaporizers are really a pain in the ass to clean.
Yeah, I can back that up.
And they're also not all that well designed, which brings me to our guest this week. It's Mark Williams, and Mark is one of the founders of Firefly. Have you used a Firefly vaporizer?
I have not. You have been telling me about all these great innovations that they've been up to, though, with the with the pellets and the Firefly vape, but I haven't gotten my hands on it yet. So I
I'm
can't
going to show you next time I come to work. I'm going to bring one to you so you can see it. It's a very cool thing. It's easy to use. It's very easy to load. It's easy to clean. It's made of high quality materials. The bowl is made of glass, so it cleans easily. The packaging looks just like your iPhone packaging, and there's a reason for that, because Mark, for many years, was a very successful UX designer at Apple. So I think I know he's taken a lot of the user experience and focused it in on the vaporizer. And I think for the money, I mean, a Firefly is about $325, so it's up there with the Mighty and the Crafty and other really high quality vaporizers. But I think it delivers, and I think it consistently delivers. And the other interesting thing is, yes, they have created these they call them pucks. And
pucks, right?
Yes, pucks are fascinating little hemp pads. I would call them hemp pads that are soaked in rosin. And rosin is just concentrated oil that's taken out of the plant in a very natural, high heat way. It's almost like you put it between a curling iron, the irons of a curling iron, and it drips the oils off. So there's no extraction, there's no funky chemicals that are doing it. It's just heating it and dripping it onto this puck. And when I was in California a few weeks ago, they came up with this method of soaking these pucks with rosin. You just drop it into the Firefly and vape. Very pleasant, very neat, beautiful flavor, delicious flavor, and high quality vapor. So I'm really happy to talk to Mark. I think he knows more about vaporizing than most people, that's for sure. He can go really deep into this topic. So I think we should all listen up, pay attention, and see what he has to say. So how'd you get into this business? Let's talk about that.
Got into the business, from the same. I guess it was a transfer of what I was already doing with the rest of my adult life.
Tell us what that was.
Which was designing user interfaces, both hardware and software, for technology companies such as Apple. I was at Apple at the time, running a UI team. They called it HI there. Many people would know it as UX, user experience, or UI, user interface. There we call it HI, human interface.
What? Oh, human interface.
Yeah,
okay.
So it's alphabet soup stuff. But in any case, my team did a lot of design work for the Mac OS X operating system for 3.5 major releases. And I'd been in tech for several decades, learned a lot, found that I was facing a lot of the same problems. There was sort of the wheel was coming around, and I was
facing some of the same problems.
Technical and design problems.
Okay.
There's just limited spaces to play in, and it was kind of getting a little boring, honestly.
Okay.
Certainly, lots of passion and very high-minded and high energy pursuit of excellence at Apple, which was great regardless of what we were working on. I started to get a little bit bored. There were some interesting opportunities at Apple, none of which felt quite right. And so I was thinking about what was my next step.
What year are we in now?
We are in 2010.
Okay. 7 years ago. Okay.
Yes. Contemporaneous with that, and going back for also several decades, about 30 years now, I've been a cannabis user, and have, I'd say, could characterize the vast majority of my interactions with cannabis as being positive or beneficial. Mm-hmm. Even
what do you use it for?
I use it for multiple things.
How? Tell me.
I vape. Well, so believe it or not, I vaporize. I don't ingest.
Shameless self-promotion. Okay.
Exactly. I don't eat it. Usually I have, and I've experimented with that at a number of dosage levels. That's not a form that works for me, for reasons that we can get into. Obviously, there's big differences in how one takes it into one's body, on the way that it affects us, or produces secondary metabolites in the case of eating, will. If you will. Okay. So I vaporize. I vaporize one puff at a time, because I believe in taking the smallest effective dose for what I want to achieve, as opposed to taking a whole bunch in and kind of riding the wave that I just created.
So you and I use this microdosing technique similarly. But when
Yes.
what do you use it for? For stress,
Yes.
for enjoyment, for sex, for looking at a tree? Tell me.
I'd say number one, I use it to manage stress and anxiety. And in that, I actually generally use very low THC containing cannabis and high CBD, although I do use it in balance.
1-to-1 ratio?
Sometimes 1-to-1, sometimes 2-to-1 CBD to THC. It's tricky because it's difficult to get consistent access to CBD-rich strains, even though you go to multiple, which, by the way, problem I'm working on from a product perspective.
We'll talk about that. But I mean, yeah, look, this is a conversation that's happening in California where CBD and THC are part of the common parlance. Most people don't even know, I think, many people don't know even the difference between CBD and THC. So I think of CBD as sort of the quiet sister molecule, the second most prevalent, and also the one that doesn't get you high. It's not very psychoactive, but it is highly anti-inflammatory and it is reducing stress, correct?
And is classified as anxiolytic.
Anxiolytic,
which is
anti-anxiety.
Anti-anxiety, yeah. Isn't it funny that anti-anxiety is anxiolytic?
So that word makes me anxious.
I know, me too. So my most frequent usage is for that.
You use it during the day?
Yes, I'll use it during the day, and obviously because I am not getting, I really don't get high during the day much because I'm doing engineering or I'm doing accounting or good.
But a lot of engineers love to be high as they're coding and working and putting things together. It's very interesting.
It's when I'm down when I'm in my happy place and I'm down in design land and I'm actually like sketching out component parts, that we're gonna make at some point, or UIs for like how the app's gonna work, etc. Being a little high for that is great.
So you might use it a little for creativity as well, not only for stress, right?
Absolutely, but within a framework.
What's the framework?
A framework, giving myself the time, the set and setting, the safe container to, now I've got 2 hours where all I get to do is that ceramic part I've wanted to improve. I'm going to do sketches around that and really get three-dimensional and maybe get a little bit more loosely associative and more capable of lateral thinking, because I tend not to be super linear when I'm a little high. So within that container, it can work great.
We're very similar. You're right.
Okay.
So do you up your dose when you're using it for creativity?
No, I wouldn't say so. I'd say that I take the same approach, which is I'll take a puff and see how it's going, and I actually listen to my body. I try my best to listen to my body and how things are working. Do I feel like I'm in a flow? That wonderful the Czech
psychologist, right?
Yeah, psychologist, neuropharmacologist.
I don't know, his name has no vowels in it. It's impossible to say.
Is very challenging to say, but the concept of flow, right, of getting there, so where you feel that productivity coming out, right, and being codified, expressed some way that you can then derive some value from. So love to use it for that. I don't up my dose, I would say. I'd say that I might up my dose, but that might be a half hour. It might take a second puff, 15 minutes or a half hour after I take my first, because then I've given time for my body to stabilize and I then sort of know where I am. And so therefore it's easy for me to, this is a 30-year user here. So so then it's because I know how my body tends to react to those things, I like to take it up gently.
Cool.
And then I will, to answer your question more fully though, I do use it in the evening occasionally for sleep. And it's very easy to put the blanket of I use indicas for night and sativas for day. It's obviously not. It's actually not that simple. I use products that have a lot of myrcene, which is a terpene that is common in cannabis, but not all cannabis. More prevalent in indicas. It tends to be sedative. I also use cannabis that is to the extent that I can test it or create it myself, high in CBN, which also has a
old weed. You know about this, right?
Of course I do. Yeah,
the stash you left in the garage, right? It gets you tired.
It's true.
And it's true.
It is very true. But the key is combining. But the myrcene, which is the terpene terpenes are pretty volatile.
Yeah.
The myrcene will be gone too.
I know.
So actually, if you can combine myrcene with that old CBN, there you've got the sleepy time combination. There's a few other terpenes that are good as well. I do my best to create specific mixes of cannabinoids and terpenes that apply to my situation.
So you'll mix more of a fresh weed with some of the dry weed? Is that how you're doing it?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Or I'll mix so fresh, yes, or sometimes an extract that I know has a good sort of hermetic seal. Because once a terpene, if the extraction process does not destroy the terpenes, and that's an if. Yeah. So there's not all extraction processes work for this. But so for instance, a rosin, if done at the right low temperature and high pressure, will not destroy the terpenes. If then you package something in a vacuum seal or in a seal in which they basically the terpenes don't off gas. Okay, so if you do that, all that stuff.
That's a lot.
It's a lot
to get to sleep.
Boy, it's a lot. It's a lot. And at the same time, it's how I'm doing product development, is by applying it to my life for these specific situations and trying to optimize for sort of like the best outcome. This is my lab, is myself. So that's why I will go to this level of detail, because do I expect anyone to ever do that? Okay, maybe a total nerd like myself who happens to be making their living from this. Sure, but there aren't that many of us. But what I do think about is that it inspires product ideas for how can I simplify that experience, make it predictable and understandable to people so that they can then have the least possible effort to accomplish the same thing.
Exactly.
So that informs my whole process. So sleep, not so as much for sex, although it works great for my wife for sex. And I actually have read some literature on differences between genders and how
That's interesting.
How it affects sex drive.
So what I find is that it's not like a sexual enhancement, but it's an intimacy enhancer. It's easier to sort of go into those places and see what comes out of that. So, and often sex can really come out of that, just depending on what you're doing and how it's going and where you're at in life, I guess.
I think that's a really good distinction. It's a really good distinction. So just in the bigger human connection, in a bigger way than sex, which sex is a beautiful manifestation, but only one form, of course. In fact, to make it a little bit funny, my wife says she likes me better when I'm a little high.
That's
and you know what? I don't blame her.
That's nice.
Actually, because I
are you a little more attentive?
A little more attentive and perhaps a little less immediately responsive to a signal. Slowing down the clock speed just a little bit can be quite helpful. So I use it in a number of ways like that. Then I feel
like I've really gotten to know you through your cannabinoid profile here. I feel like we're having a sharing moment through cannabinoids. It's very interesting, actually. So tell me, how'd you get into making the Firefly? And when did it all begin? Tell me that creation myth.
I was sitting on the couch with my good buddy, Sasha Robinson, who I founded the business with a few months after that. We had met through a Burning Man after party on the dance floor with our friends, introduced us, and he's just a super fun guy, super big energy, smiling, and we just could, and the hilarious thing was we didn't know what the other guy did. Within 2 minutes after the song, we're done dancing, we're talking about products. Developing products, just because it was like attracts like, and he came from a product development background, so we immediately fell into a friendship and nerding out about that, and we started just hanging out as friends because he's a great guy and we really enjoyed hanging out, and so we would smoke some cannabis together. And we'd smoke joints or pipes and like that, but we're both physically active people. And as you get into your 40s, you start noticing that even if cannabis is one thing and it's not tobacco, but smoking is just not a great way to ingest anything. Or not ingest, but consume anything. So we felt the load on our bodies. It's a real thing. Tars, ashes, hot coals in the throat, etc. And we're like, hey, we want that. So at the same time, I have another friend who introduced me to this big, crazy contraption called a volcano vaporizer. Of course. And love what those guys did. And that said, it was a kind of ridiculous product experience, a ridiculous user experience.
You mean blowing it into a bag, having the vapor rise into a bag that you have to then suck
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then pass the bag around.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
It can be great for a party setting.
It's a great party.
And it can be very appropriate for. It can be very appropriate for some things. It doesn't generalize to being a mass adopted consumer experience, of course. But vapor was it was a paradigm shift for me. Oh my God, I get everything I want, and minus the stuff I don't want. And as I got more into it, I found actually that the effects were more nuanced than I could get through smoking, much more nuanced, because it's just treating it with a lighter touch.
I think also it doesn't burn all of the compounds in the plant.
Right.
So
and destroy them. It doesn't destroy
some
them.
of that stuff you're either not getting or it's somehow modifying.
Absolutely right.
Yep.
It absolutely doesn't destroy stuff that you might actually want to keep because cannabinoids do change through the application of heat. They change from one form into another, all the way to destruction. Right, so it's not like they become invulnerable at 450 Fahrenheit or 500 Fahrenheit. They're still part of the world, and you apply too much heat, they'll degrade and be destroyed.
So tell me right now, since I've got you here, what's the ideal setting for the temperature to get the cannabinoids and the terpenes to the fullest extent? This is a big controversy. I've been researching this for months, and everybody has a different set of numbers. Where does the Firefly creator come in on this?
Gosh, great one. So the answer is there's not one setting. Okay. And that's the big insight, actually, is that you can set, let's say, a max, right, of 400. Or actually, let's say 415 because you want to get some CBN, which has a higher vaporization point than Delta-9 THC, for instance, right? You could choose whatever your top point is. But then it's how you get there that matters. Meaning that if you, let's say, turn on this oven and you wait till everything's 415 degrees, well, what's happened in between the time that you were waiting for that oven to heat up? What's happened, just like you're cooking something, things have been steaming and off-gassing and getting out into the atmosphere everywhere except your body. So the terpenes, especially the lighter weight terpenes that have the lowest vaporization points, and we could be talking down around the 250 Fahrenheit range.
Oh, okay.
Well below a vaporization point of cannabinoids, for instance. They'll be gone if you're waiting around to heat up some container of your material until it's 415. By the time you take that first puff, those are likely gone or significantly degraded because they degrade through heat too. You've also turned THC acid, which is, if you're using flour, is the form that THC is in before heating. You've turned that into Delta-9 THC at roughly 350 to 370 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
It's argued, but in that ballpark. So in any case, the right temperature is many temperatures because everything in the plant actually vaporizes at a different temperature because the molecules are not all the same weight.
So the way I've heard to approach this is make sure you vaporize beyond the taste and the flavor.
Yes.
Right? So in other words, the first couple of vapors hits will be very flavorful because it's mostly terpene going, right?
Yes.
And then post that, take another few hits if you want cannabinoids. What do you say?
I say that is largely accurate. A more elegant way to do that is to do that with every puff. So so imagine when you're starting a puff that your material's at room temperature. And then as you're inhaling, your material's temperature rises to whatever your max setting is, let's say 400 Fahrenheit. And when you're done with your puff, you've gone from room temperature to 400, meaning you've covered a range of temperature during a single inhalation. Meaning you've gone past every vaporization point of everything that you want in the plant up to the max in every puff.
Well, what do you set the damn temperature at?
You set it for 400.
The highest?
Or whatever. It doesn't have to be 400. It can be 350. We've got many temperature settings.
Yes.
You set it for what you want your max to be, but in my opinion, the way to most fully enjoy the plant, meaning the terpenes, the cannabinoids, all of which have different vaporization points, is to have a dynamic vaporization, meaning the temperature changes while you're inhaling.
Is that about inhaling differently? Is it?
Doesn't
how do you do this? It's very complicated, Mark. You're really making it. Now I'm really getting confused. I'm getting stressed.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. See, and that's actually one of the interesting things, Joe, is that it's hard to communicate.
So tell me how you do it, or show.
You use the Firefly.
Yeah.
Because we have different heating technology than anyone else. So almost everyone else, what you do is you set a temperature. And it heats up to that temperature over let's say 30 seconds or a minute, or in some cases longer, but whatever, some time. And then you come back and you're like, okay, it's at that temperature, and then you take a puff. And what you're getting is vapor, roughly speaking, at that temperature. Conversely, with the Firefly, what you do is you just touch it. It heats up in 3 seconds, so it's pretty much ready to go.
Right.
Then you start inhaling. Well, when you're starting to inhale, the temperature of material is at room temperature, because we don't heat your material before you run hot air through it. We have a technology called convection, which means heating with air. The great advantage of that is that I can separate my heat source from my material, so that when my little heater is hot, it's not making my material hot.
It doesn't burn the plant.
It doesn't even make it warm.
It doesn't have any contact.
It doesn't really have any contact
Yeah.
until you draw air over the heater and then into your material. The beauty of that is that that's the first time your material is getting changed by temperature.
Okay.
And what you can do then is by separating these two, as you're running hot air over it, the temperature of the material is rising over time, and you can also control the temperature of the air as it's going into the bowl. So we have a tremendous amount of control over the temperature of the air as it's coming into contact with the material. And what we do is we raise the temperature of that air over the course of several seconds as you're inhaling. And by raising that temperature, we cover a range of temperatures, all of which apply to the material by the time you've taken a 7 to 10 second inhalation.
It's a 10-second inhalation.
Roughly speaking, yeah.
Are you the guys that say sip the inhalation, or you just say suck?
Either way is okay.
Okay.
Either way is okay.
Okay. All right, so it's going to happen automatically if I use a Firefly.
It happens automatically. You don't have to think about it. It just happens.
Cool. Great.
So that is a roundabout way of saying, so what's the right temperature? Well, you do want to figure out what you want your max to be. Our default is 400 because it will vaporize the majority of cannabinoids people want. But we do go higher because if some people want to vaporize CBN, it's not going to be available at 400. You have to get it up to around 415-ish before that's going to be available. But most people don't want CBN, especially during the day.
Makes you tired.
Makes you tired. So that's an opt-in for us. But all along the way, it matters how you get to 400 or whatever you set. And so with the Firefly, you go from room temp to your max with every puff. And so for what we would say is that's the best way to vaporize. That's the best temperature to vaporize at, which is every temperature. And if you can do every temperature within one puff, then you're covered.
Now, don't all convection vaporizers do the same thing, though?
No, definitely. The main other convection vaporizer in the market right now, or convection vaporizers plural, are made by Storz & Bickel, the people who make the Volcano.
They make the
Crafty and the Mighty,
right?
Yes, and but the way that they work is different. They heat up a big, heavy aluminum heat exchanger over time. They take like about a minute to 2 minutes to heat up.
It does, yes. It takes a long time.
And the advantage there is it stays really stable.
The temperature,
but it's not dynamic. So you sort of you heat up to that temperature, and it stays that temperature consistently. So it's a different way of heating up ours because we are more of a momentary model, meaning that our thing is almost immediately responsive. It means that we can be a lot more dynamic. We can change quickly. And that's part of what makes the Firefly unique. That's actually the root cause of why people think it tastes better.
Got it.
Because it's actually changing quickly, whereas the other vaporizers all are more of a steady state, which is more static. And change is more information.
Okay.
So that's why people think ours tastes quote unquote richer.
What I like about yours is how easy it is to clean.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
No, it's a glass bowl. Is that what it is that
Yes,
makes it so easy to clean?
Yes, and then a glass vapor path as well.
Does it clog?
No, in the vapor path, the filter, the particulate filter, which is in the mouthpiece. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
That's what I have to change.
Yeah. I'll show it to you later. In any case, it's a particulate filter that's in the mouthpiece that's removable and cleanable.
Got it.
It's a little mesh screen.
That's what I need to do.
Yes, and it makes it's really easy and it makes a huge diff.
You clean it with alcohol?
I do give it a few wipes with alcohol on the glass. And the mouthpiece with the particulate filter, I just blow it because it's just catching like a little bit of cellulose material, and so you just blow that in and it's clean.
So my only experience is with your second iteration, Firefly 2. I never saw Firefly 1, which had some problems, I guess, but things get better over time. What's your next iteration? Are you doing Firefly 3?
Yes, definitely doing a Firefly 3. Just like with the difference between the 1 and the 2, we're applying everything that we've learned by listening to our customers to make it better. That said, I'm going to probably still sell the Firefly 2 because it's very solid product. It doesn't. I don't have any sort of out of control repair situation. It's really high quality. And people still want it. And so I'll probably sell them side by side and make the three different enough so that they are two different product experiences. They still capitalize on, say, our same core technology and our same philosophy of vaporization, but would be different enough physically and maybe in terms of interaction.
What's it going to do that's going to be different? Do you have one with you?
No, I don't. It'll be a convection vaporizer like the Firefly 2. There will be form factor differences, and we are just learning to be better at vaporizing. So I'm learning more and more about fluid dynamics, for instance, on when you pass air through a material, how do you create maximum extraction of this versus not that?
Fluid dynamics, as in oils, melting the oils of the plant. Is that what that is?
Correct. But one can also think about air as a fluid because it is. So fluid dynamics, I mean in terms of the airflow over the material to maximize efficiency of extraction. So basically, for the same level of effort that you'd put in as a user in terms of inhaling, you would get some percentage more of extracted material, denser. So how do you make it so that people put in less work and get more results, without making it too twitchy?
Yeah.
Which is important too.
Yeah. What's the efficiency of a vaporizer versus a joint?
Well, so first of all, a joint was the first vaporizer.
Okay, I'll buy that.
Yeah, in that it's got a cherry at the end, right? And that cherry is running at
the ember. You mean
the ember? That's over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, right? That's hot. But so you imagine it then as just a heat source. What it's in contact with is combusting, right? Which actually destroys a lot of cannabinoids. But what it's adjacent to is vaporizing.
Okay.
If you think about it, and the further you get from the cherry, the lower the temperature gradient. Right, because it's just distance of how. So that's actually why a joint generally will produce a better effect than smoking out of a bong, because you're actually with a joint you're vaporizing. So that material down by your lips that's far away from the cherry that you're passing smoke over is being heat. You're passing heat through there.
I see.
So a joint is actually a vaporizer, which a really good one because it does that gradient of heat. Just like the Firefly does that I was explaining earlier. But it also has the negative in that you get the cherry burn and stuff.
But you're losing a lot too. Isn't a lot going up in smoke?
A lot's just going up in smoke, yes. So a vaporizer is ultimately much more efficient because you're not destroying the material in order to extract the desirable stuff, the cannabinoids and the terpenes.
In a Firefly, how many draws do I get before the plant matter is finished, before there's nothing left in it?
In practice, depends on someone's pack and their material, right?
Okay. You guys like a loose pack or a dense pack? I don't remember.
I like sort of a denser pack.
Okay.
With a somewhat coarsely ground material.
Okay.
Pack it down so you feel sort of that spongy resistance. It shouldn't be super loose, but it also it's not good to put cannabis in like a coffee grinder and turn it into powder and try to put it in a convection vaporizer because there's nowhere for air to go in that situation. So you want to find a mid grind basically, and that's pretty easy to achieve. You just the simple the rotational grinders that have the little teeth work great.
Couple of twists.
Just a couple of twists works great. And so you pack it kind of firm in there, and the nice thing about the way the Firefly works, shameless plug. But
you're allowed to have one. That was it.
Okay, thanks. Is that you're only running heat over it as you're inhaling. So if you want to just take one puff, you've exposed that bowl to that hot air for 10 seconds. You have adulterated the cannabis the least by doing so, because you didn't steep it in a pot, cook that sauce down for hours on end and change it fundamentally. You just applied a very light touch. So in terms of the amount of difference between what you started with and what you now have on your second puff, it's the least possible difference.
Okay.
So it keeps your material fresher, is really what it comes down to.
How many do I get, though, in a bowl?
You get maybe 10.
Okay.
I'd say five puffs, then I tend to stir it around after 5, and then I'll get another 5. So about 10 is great. And let's say with a range between 8 and 12, depending on how long your puffs are.
Okay.
Right? Longer puff might mean you're going to get deeper extraction, so you're going to get fewer puffs per bowl. But between 8 and 12, with an average being 10.
I think this is really fascinating, and I'm so glad that you've actually taken the time to explore the science and the dynamics of how these things work.
I can't stop.
That's
so
the problem.
fun. It's so fun.
This is
and
the problem I have with the topic of cannabis also. It sort of grabbed a part of my brain and it hasn't let go. I didn't realize this was going to just keep going on and on. Like there's so much to keep learning, yeah?
Agreed. There's so much to keep learning. I didn't either. And to circle back to one of your other questions, how do we decide to do it? Well, we thought it was going to be a lot easier than it was. How hard can it be? You get a battery and you get a resistive element to make a heater, and then well, it turns out to do it, so it's not hard to make a crappy one, actually. It's really hard to make a really good one. And that's why we're doing this, is because we're trying to make the best thing we know how to do. And that's turning out to be, well, it's a journey. It's a process of learning more and getting better. And so it does draw me in every day.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, so what about the price? The price is high on a Firefly, right? It's over $300.
Yes.
Right? Most of the precision vaporizers, those that you can control the temperature, are about the same. How's it going to go down to make it more mass?
You have to start with a design point where you kind of put some limits on yourself in terms of how much the thing's going to cost to actually make.
Okay.
The Firefly costs a lot. Well, it costs $329. It costs a fair price. We think it's an entirely fair price because it actually costs a lot to make.
It does.
It costs a lot to make. We do machined glass. Machining glass is not cheap because you do it actually super slowly. Cutting head for machining glass moves at a certain rate so it doesn't shatter the glass, and that limits speed, which creates cost.
Okay.
As do the raw materials, because we use all FDA food grade certified stuff, and paying more for that class of materials is very different than if you just throw some plastic, on something and call it a day. So ours costs a lot to make because we care about what we're putting in someone's hand.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, they're all expensive. And I think they're all made from high quality materials. I don't think anything costing that amount of money is made from a crummy material, do you?
Without casting aspersions at any particular vendor, there are different standards. In the $300 price range, those folks are generally using really good materials. But that is not true once you get lower.
Yeah.
Once you're sub 200, for now, the way that it exists now, you're vaping plastic.
Say no more. In a sentence, what's the future of vaporizing technology?
The future is a better understanding of how cannabinoids and terpenes affect the human body, and thus how the vaporization technology can best deliver those for predictable, consistent effects. And so predictability and consistency are where it's going, and it's bigger than just vaporization. Now, vaporization does happen to be the ultimate delivery mechanism for cannabis for most people. Ingesting is great for high consumption medical users. Right, eating it can be great for high consumption medical users because you can get hundreds of milligrams of it into you and affect the body in ways that you just can't with the amount you're getting in vaporization. But in terms of what most people are looking for, which is a quick onset of effects, and also a relatively short tail, like after 2 hours, it's it's over or over-ish, right? As opposed to eating, you might be 10 hours in and you're like, when is this going to stop? Which I think then makes it much more amenable to high needs medical users.
If you want to relieve your pain for 8 hours,
different
go
thing.
for it.
You go for it. That's not what it's most applicable to for people. So vaporization, what we're going to learn is how to do it better, how to get, and that's going to be based on how we understand cannabinoids more deeply. So for instance, the difference between THC acid, and delta-9 THC.
What's on the leaf versus what's being heated.
Exactly, and what you might, as a user, might want out of each of those different molecules, right, within your session. Well, that actually implies that you would use a different, at least temperature setting, but maybe even a different vaporization technology to extract one but not the other. Right now, most people are focused on delta-9 THC.
Sure.
as the market matures, people will realize that there's a whole lot more to the plant than that.
Sure.
115 plus more cannabinoids, for instance, not to mention the entourage effect of the many permutations of how they interact. As we get to understand the plant better and how to better apply it as a neuropharmacological agent, vaporization technology will be an enabler of higher fidelity of getting to experience the full spectrum of the plant, as opposed to right now, which is get me super high with delta-9 THC, which is kind of that's sort of the teenager mindset of I just want to get stoned, and that's okay too. It's great to get stoned, great to get high, but the plant can offer a lot more than that. In addition, not without getting. I mean, you can get it without getting high. It doesn't mean you have to get high, but you can actually get a little high and get a whole lot more too. But it depends on how you're doing it. And that's what drives me in terms of understanding how to better apply vaporization technology. And of course, here's my simple answer: a lot more extracts. A lot more extracts, because you can more consistently dose them. So, for instance, it's difficult with flower if you take a flower to lab, you're going to get pretty high batch to batch variability in terms of its test results.
Yeah.
Just because you know one bud has a lot of THCA, one bud doesn't, right? So it's difficult to ensure super even dosing consistency there.
Yeah.
Once you extract it and you put it all in a vat, right, and then you measure out a certain amount of it, well, then it's kind of all that vat if you've stirred it up for a while. And thus, when you put a certain amount of it in some thing that allows you to consume it, you have a better idea of what you're giving somebody.
Are we talking about rosins now, or are we moving to oils and resins?
Both. Rosins is a great one.
So
that's a whole other conversation.
So you're having an event tonight.
Yes.
At Meadow.
Yes.
Which is going to explore some rosin technology in the Firefly. Why don't you tell us about that?
Thank you for that opportunity to talk about it.
You're welcome.
We're really excited.
Can't wait to go.
We're really excited.
Really looking forward to it.
So we love rosin.
Tell people what rosin is.
Rosin
again,
is,
you're in California here.
You can think of rosin as everything from the plant except the cellulose material, the woody pulp. So and that's great. That's what you want. That's what we call the whole plant experience.
Yep.
It's everything except the wood, right? And so you leave the wood behind, and now you've got this sticky stuff. And because rosin has been extracted with high pressure but low heat, you haven't fundamentally altered the cannabinoids too much. For instance, you didn't turn THC acid into delta-9 THC by extracting it with rosin, meaning that you can do real-time change, which is more like it's way better. It's way more effective actually to do
real. To try this.
It's great. Anyway, so rosin is wonderful in that it is the least adulterated form of cannabis extract. So we love rosin. It also stores really well, because it doesn't have as much surface area. So when you turn it into a liquid or liquid-ish, it now only has a surface area around the outside. Therefore, it doesn't get oxidized. It doesn't get oxidative damage.
Okay, I never thought about that.
Yeah, so it keeps it fresher for longer, especially then if you vacuum pack it, which we're doing as well. So we've taken that rosin, and funny enough, we put it on a organic hemp fiber felt pad. It's used for growing medium. It's grown in Switzerland. It's organic hemp fiber. It doesn't have any it's got trace stuff in it, but really it's a neutral substrate, right? And when we put the rosin on there, it's like, oh wow, you're reassembling a bud. Why would you do that? It turns out it actually vaporizes differently than if you were to use a flower, because the rosin then sort of like it flows onto this growing material, which you can imagine is sort of like it's a lattice, right? It's a three-dimensional lattice of these little fibers going back and forth, right? It's felt. And so then the rosin runs down those little, through that lattice, kind of like dew on a spider's web, right? And impregnates the whole thing, but still has way less surface area. So it still stays fresh. Anyway, when you put we put those things, they happen to be shaped like the bowl of the Firefly. So you stick one in the Firefly, and you make sure you're at the right temperature.
What's the right temperature?
The right temperature, we're experimenting.
We're a little lower now, right?
We're a little lower now. We've gone lower. We're now at around 420 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's high.
It can take a lot more heat, actually. It's funny. We've also experimented down to 330, 350. and we're looking at that. So there's not, and that's why we're doing this event. Is actually we want
I'm
to
going to be a guinea pig tonight,
yes,
right?
We want to learn from people.
Fantastic.
We want to learn from people what's working for them. So in any case, the big difference is that every puff off of one of these things tastes like the first puff of a bowl. And that's what you can't get with flower 10 hits in. 10 hits in, you're like, ooh, now it's tasting, it's kind of toasty, right? It's like, that doesn't give me that beautiful. These things, you keep the flavor the whole time you're using the puff.
Wow.
Because the terpenes have been captured in the rosin that's now impregnated into rather than being more on the surface and off-gassing. It basically enhances terpene stability. So each puff tastes like a fresh bowl.
Cool.
And that's our little pitch. It's like the plant, except what if your plant never had an old taste? What if it was a fresh puff every time?
Fresh puff. It sounds like an old cigarette ad.
Yeah, no kidding. I know. Gotta avoid that. God,
Winston tastes good like a
God,
cigarette.
oh my God! I see the 4 out of 5 doctors recommending smoking Lucky Strikes. Oh my God! Which is actually a funny thing. Trying to avoid those ham-fisted claims that would be misleading. It's an interesting thing in this field. Not overselling, right?
Tell me an example of what you're seeing.
Well, I mean, like the FDA, for instance. If on our site we started to talk deeply medical, we'd be really exposing ourselves, and everyone is exposing themselves to the FDA saying, you haven't proven that to our satisfaction, therefore we're issuing a cease and desist order, and which they can do at any time. It's just a question of when they might selectively enforce that. So one has to be very, and that's for good reason. I don't, it's very easy to be a critic of the FDA, and I think there are many things that can be criticized about. But it's because you don't want people selling snake oil.
No, you don't.
Right? You don't. And so you have to be really careful with those
things. And there's a lot of snake oil being sold out there in the world of cannabis today.
So what is less arguable is your subjective experience. So either you tell me, like when you try the rosin pucks tonight, you'll either say, oh, it's my 3rd hit. It does kind of taste like the first hit. Or we'll pass one to you that's like 7 hits in. You'll say, wow, that does taste it. Or you'll say to yourself, nah, he's full of shit. But you'll know. And in the end, that's what matters, is that someone will have that experience and they'll know whether or not it's meeting their standard. And if it does, then we can capture enough of those people and deliver a consistent product, then we'll have something that has legs.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Let's talk quickly about dosing for the 3 areas that I'm interested in. I'm going to suck your brain a little bit here, which is pain, stress, anxiety, and insomnia. Okay?
Yes.
So say we're using the Firefly.
Yes.
How would are any differences in dosing for those things, by the way? Pain, stress, anxiety, or insomnia?
As a blanket for any of those 3, it depends. I would not give a blanket, and here's why. There's a couple really important reasons. Because the amount of pain is different, right? Right.
Oh,
so the amount and the amount of insomnia is different, right? So it's what
it's a place to begin.
It is a place to begin.
Where does one begin?
Well, one begins with the minimum effective dose, and one works up from there by, for instance, keeping a journal of how it affects you.
That's just how I'm doing it.
And by getting to know your own body, getting to know your endocannabinoid system. I'm assuming if anyone is still with us on this podcast, and I'm sure there are people, you probably already know about your endocannabinoid system.
Who knows if they do or not? But it's the receptor system that cannabis interacts with within the body. Yeah.
Correct. And by getting to know your own baselines and how things affect you, you then become more able to dose yourself. But it's important to say that there's a huge personal responsibility aspect here.
Yeah.
You have to know, all of us actually have different baselines in terms of not just the receptor systems, but the hormones that we produce endogenously that are the little keys in those locks, i.e. Anandamide, which delta-9 THC is an analog, a phytomimetic analog, plant-based analog, or 2-AG, of which CBD is an analog. But there are more C-coupled proteins. I've been reading.
I know.
Yeah. It goes way deeper, right?
It goes way small.
You gotta start to understand your own body because we're all different. We all have different baselines, and we are all different sensitivities. So to say, okay, for pain, take 10 puffs, that might be absolutely the wrong thing to say to somebody who really is sensitive enough and has a high enough production of CBD already that one puff might be the right thing.
So here's what I'm trying to figure out to do, okay? Because most people don't give a shit about their own bodies, okay? Most people have no idea how an aspirin works, how cough medicine, nobody knows, okay? We've been dissociated from it, whatever, there's lots of reasons.
Yeah.
It's very scientific and it can be very niche and nerdy, and you have a brain that loves that stuff, and I have a brain that sometimes loves that stuff, but, tires of it. So how do we say to people, look, guys, this is a plant medicine, it's not a pill, it is different. I mean, my goal, the way I'm thinking about it is to say, start with CBD, escalate up, see if you get an effect. If you don't get an effect, add in a small amount of THC. And you can do that in a plant or with a tincture or however you want to do it, and then escalate that to see if you're comfortable. How would you say do it?
I think that's a great recommendation. Okay. I think it's great because CBD on its own, or with a tiny amount of delta-9 THC, CBD actually seems to create a longer effect. It reduces the effect of delta-9 THC,
yes,
but it also creates a longer effect, meaning that you can be less high, but for a longer time.
I see.
Right, and so one might infer then that CBD taken from an external source might do the same to anandamide that you're producing yourself, right? So meaning that anandamide, which would create in general a more elevated, more blissful feeling, might degrade a little more slowly as a result of taking CBD in, which wouldn't give you a high coming externally. It would just, in theory, allow your body to be just slightly higher than it would normally, which could be the perfect medicine for you.
That sounds pretty good to me.
It sounds pretty good without spinning you out and making you high in a way that you don't want to be. So I think that's a great recommendation. And then I think learning to supplement that with THC, sort of climbing the ladder, and as we get more capable other cannabinoids, is a really responsible way to approach stuff. And more importantly, more likely to give people the outcomes they want and keep them from running the other direction because they got paranoid because they took way too big a dose when they first tried it. That's the thing to avoid.
That's great. Have you noticed any difference between dosing for any of those conditions? I mean, I know that if you use a little THC at night, it's better for sleep.
Yes.
This is what research tells me. What have you noticed, or what have you read about?
I have not used THC. I have not used cannabis for pain that much. Well, actually, no. And when I do, it's usually in the form of a topical rub.
Yeah.
And in that, I can't really compare dosing versus vaporizing, right? So for pain, I usually use a topical rub. I'm fortunate enough to be healthy, so I don't have any internal pain that needs to be treated. So that's really not a condition that I have to. That I choose to use cannabis for. However, I do use it for occasional insomnia and frequent stress. And so for occasional insomnia, it depends. If I'm using it at night when I'm going to bed for the first time, when I haven't even started a sleep cycle, I'll use a light touch, a couple puffs, because I'm not looking to just sedate myself heavily. I just, once again, it's my philosophy of using the minimum thing. And that's usually enough for me. That's usually great. It's really almost more about changing the state of mind, short-circuiting the little hamster wheel of my thoughts, right? That you want to get away from. And just a little disruption of that goes a long way. Now, if I wake up after 4 hours in between my sleep cycles because the hamsters come back, or for whatever other reason, then I might take more than a couple puffs. I'll take enough to have a sedative effect because I know that if I don't get back to sleep relatively soon,
tomorrow's going to be
a tough day.
It's really going to suck.
So I'll get back into my second sleep cycle, and this is occasional. I want to point that out. It's occasional and more rare, but then I'll use it a little bit more heavily because then I'm just looking to look, now it's time for a little bit more heavily sedative effect, and so that's probably my heaviest or largest amount of consumption would be if I wake up between sleep cycles, but also my least frequent.
What I've learned is if you smoke about an hour before sleep, it's better because the metabolites are kicking in, so you're sort of wearing down a little bit. And also, if you have a lot of that third stage sleep disorder stuff where you're waking up at 4 a.m, if you take an edible, like a low dose edible, a couple hours anytime before sleep, it can carry you through the night. So you mix a little bit, mix here and there.
Thank you.
Try that.
Thank you. I will actually.
It's you don't have a lot of insomnia, so it's hard to predict when you're going to wake up. But sometimes, like I have some insomnia too, and I've noticed that if I have a stressful moment in a day, like something that's sticking with me, that's sort of a trigger that I may have.
Yes.
I may have not the best sleep of my life. So that's when I'll use the edible and maybe a puff or two before sleep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I like that. I'm going to actually try that because
Try it.
I just came across some really nicely made low dose 5 milligrams of Delta 9 THC pastilles that I'm going to give a try to. Yeah.
Have you tried Terra?
I've tried Kiva's products before, and I think I've tried these. Yeah. Oh yeah, the espresso ones.
They're great. I mean, you don't need the bean if you're trying to go to sleep.
Yeah. That's a nice product.
It is, and it's pretty consistent.
Yeah. Well, that's the advantage of extracts.
There you go.
Consistency.
There you go. Thanks for this.
You bet. It was a real pleasure.
So in closing today, I just want to thank all of our patrons for supporting us in the efforts of this podcast. It means so much to us. And if you guys are listening to this and enjoying it, again, I'm going to remind you, ask you, beg you, plead with you to consider donating. You don't only have to donate $1 a month to help us keep going. We'd really appreciate it. It really will make our lives easier, better, and give us more access to more people. We also want to ask you to let us know if any of the rewards are not coming through. We've been sending books. We've been, honoring our commitments as best we can, but we don't often hear back when things don't come through. So if you have subscribed or contributed and you haven't received your book or your reward, please let us know. Final request is, folks, please let us know if there's something you'd like to hear. We're open to your suggestions. We have 1 million people we want to talk to about the topics, but I also want to be sure that you know that we're open to hearing your thoughts and suggestions. So again, if you want to contribute to us, please log on to our page, bravenewweed.com, and contribute via Patreon. Correct, Matthew?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You can access the Patreon from bravenewweed.com, or you can also just go directly to patreon.com/bravenewweed. And our email is open. We're on all social media, Twitter, Facebook, all of that. Just reach out to us. And if you want to email us, if you know something we should be talking about, some cool tech that we need to be made aware of, you can email us, bravenewweedcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Please reach out. We're always listening.
Thank you, Mr. Hendershot, and thank you for tuning in.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for listening to the Brave New Weed podcast. This episode and all future episodes are made possible by amazing listeners like yourself. If you like what you've heard, we encourage you to show your support by giving $1 a month for special access and rewards on patreon.com/bravenewweed. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram via @bravenewweed. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/bravenewweed. And remember, you can always find more information about us or information discussed in each episode by pointing your favorite browser to bravenewweed.com.